The audience bursts into laughter on live television under the bright studio lights. The host, known for her sarcasm and provocations, mocks Keanu Reeves' faith with a smug smile. She asks, "You, Keanu, do you really believe there's someone up there watching over you, especially after everything you've been through?" More laughter follows. The camera cuts to Keanu, who remains silent. He gently holds the small cross hanging from his neck. His eyes are calm, steady, unshaken, ***. This moment, seemingly ordinary at first glance, marks the beginning of an extraordinary chain of events, a collision of perspectives, emotions, and beliefs that will ripple far beyond the confines of this brightly lit studio. What unfolds is not just another late-night talk show interview but a profound exploration of faith, resilience, and humanity. It challenges not only the individuals directly involved but also the millions watching at home, forcing them to confront their own assumptions about spirituality, pain, and redemption. Keanu's silence speaks volumes. In a world obsessed with noise, constant chatter, debates, arguments, and rebuttals, his decision to remain still becomes an act of defiance. It disrupts the expected script. Instead of engaging in verbal sparring or succumbing to defensiveness, he chooses presence over persuasion. This quiet dignity stems from decades of personal trials, the death of his newborn daughter, the tragic loss of his partner in a car accident, and the passing of his best friend. Each of these experiences could have broken him, yet they seem to have fortified his spirit instead, infusing his life with a grace that resonates deeply with fans worldwide. On the other side stands the host, a figure celebrated for dismantling pretense and exposing vulnerabilities in celebrities. Her brand thrives on controversy, sarcasm, and interviews that often toe the line between insightful and exploitative. Beneath her polished veneer, however, lies someone grappling with her own doubts, fears, and perhaps even unresolved pain. This duality makes her uniquely positioned to either deepen the divide between skepticism and belief or bridge it entirely. As the scene unfolds, viewers witness more than just a verbal sparring match. They see two contrasting philosophies collide, one anchored in cynicism and doubt, the other grounded in faith and acceptance. As the host presses on, quoting Bible verses mockingly and exaggerating their tone to elicit laughs, the room doesn't respond as expected. Laughter falters, replaced by awkward silences. Even her usual arsenal of quips fails to land. Why? Because Keanu's unwavering composure disrupts the script. He refuses to play the role assigned to him, that of the defensive believer scrambling to justify his convictions. Instead, he embodies patience, listening intently as if recognizing the underlying pain driving her provocations. His response, or rather, his lack thereof, forces everyone to pause. There's power in restraint, especially when faced with hostility. Rather than engaging in a debate where neither party might change their stance, Keanu opts for stillness. His fingers graze the cross around his neck, a subtle yet deliberate gesture that underscores its significance. To him, this symbol represents far more than religious affiliation. It encapsulates memory, forgiveness, survival. Each touch serves as a reminder of lessons learned through suffering, hope rediscovered amidst despair. The studio was a spectacle designed to captivate, with overhead lights crisscrossing above, reflecting off sleek black walls that gleamed under the intense illumination. The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation, akin to the electric charge before a storm. Every detail had been meticulously crafted to create an aura of excitement and intrigue. From the plush red chairs arranged neatly in rows to the high-definition screens displaying animated graphics, the setting exuded glamour and sophistication. The audience clapped and cheered, their enthusiasm palpable, as if they were about to witness not just an interview, but a performance, a blend of comedy, scandal, and intellectual jousting. This particular show had earned its reputation for exactly that: controversy, sarcasm, and interviews that felt less like conversations and more like verbal duels. Each episode promised drama, and tonight was no exception. The energy in the room crackled with expectation, heightened by whispers circulating among attendees about what might unfold. Rumors hinted at a potentially explosive exchange given the guests' history of navigating sensitive topics with poise and introspection. When the host walked onto the stage, the crowd erupted into thunderous applause. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced with theatrical flair, "he's an actor, producer, motorcycle lover, a living legend, and apparently, a bit of a monk too. Please welcome, with thunderous applause, the man, the myth, Keanu Reeves." The cheers were deafening, reverberating through the studio like waves crashing against a shore. Keanu stepped in with calm strides, dressed simply in dark jeans, a black blazer, and a plain t-shirt. Hanging subtly from his neck was a cross necklace, an accessory that contrasted sharply with his otherwise understated look. Yet, it wasn't merely decorative, it carried something deeper, almost intangible. He nodded in greeting, offering a soft smile that conveyed warmth without grandiosity. No sweeping gestures, no dramatic entrances, just a quiet confidence that suggested he'd faced many stages in life, and this was simply another. As he took his seat, the initial questions followed the predictable path: career highlights, recent films, behind-the-scenes anecdotes. Keanu answered gently, deliberately, maintaining a light mood that kept the audience entertained. But gradually, as always on this show, the tone began to shift. The host leaned forward, her grin sly and calculated. "Keanu," she said, her voice dripping with playful mockery, "you seem like a grounded guy, maybe even spiritual. But tell me something, do you really believe in miracles? After everything Hollywood has shown you, after everything life's taken from you?" The audience laughed, their amusement echoing through the studio. But Keanu didn't react. His eyes remained calm, reflective, yet unyielding. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he listened, a spiritual kind of response that spoke louder than words. The host seized the opportunity to quip again, eliciting more laughter. Keanu lowered his eyes for a second, gently touching the cross necklace with his fingers. It was a simple gesture, almost unnoticeable, but full of meaning. The camera zoomed in slightly on the cross, capturing how it swayed softly with the motion of his hand. Then he looked up, calm and direct, still offering no verbal response, just presence. As the conversation continued, the host grew bolder, weaving more pointed jokes about spirituality mixed with ironic comments about faith, dogma, and religion as emotional escapes. The audience laughed again, though something in the air had begun to shift, a quiet crack in the show's usual rhythm. Then came the pivotal question: do you really think there's someone up there watching over you? Keanu stayed silent for a few seconds, the weight of the moment hanging heavily in the room. It was a crucial juncture, one wrong word, and he'd become another meme, dismissed as naive or overly pious. But if his words rang true, perhaps something transformative would occur that night. Finally, he spoke, his voice calm, steady, and barely above a whisper: "If I'm still standing after everything, it wasn't just luck." The statement landed like a stone dropped into still water, creating ripples that spread across the room. The laughter stopped abruptly, replaced by a collective hush. People exchanged glances, silently asking one another, "Did you feel that too?" The camera cut back to the necklace. The cross now seemed heavier, more real, no longer a mere decoration but a declaration. The host attempted to shift gears with another joke, but the laughter was faint. Something had shifted irreversibly. Keanu remained steady, never combative, never defensive, just observant and present. What no one realized at that moment was that his cross wouldn't merely serve as a symbol, it would become the trigger for a turning point none were prepared to witness. The studio lights dimmed slightly as the energy in the room transformed, hovering somewhere between discomfort and reflection. The host leaned forward with a forced smile, trying to steer the conversation back to safer ground. "So, Keanu," she said, her tone laced with sarcasm, "let's talk religion since we're already here." The audience chuckled again, though not as freely as before. She launched into a monologue sprinkled with biting remarks. "You know what I always say," she smirked, her delivery exaggerated for effect. "Religion is like a fairy tale for people who are scared to grow up. All that divine plan stuff, comforting, sure, but not exactly real." The laughter grew louder, punctuated by scattered applause. Clearly, the audience was warming back up to the routine. But Keanu didn't flinch. He didn't roll his eyes, shift in his seat, or sigh in frustration. He simply held the cross again, not clutching it, not making a spectacle of it, but resting his fingers against it as if grounding himself. The camera caught the gesture once more, highlighting the absence of panic or defensiveness in his body language. Just stillness. As the host continued her tirade, the screen subtly began to shift. A narrator's voice broke in, gentle and thoughtful, pulling the audience away from the surface-level banter and into the depths of Keanu's journey. What the world saw on that stage was a man being tested, the narrator intoned, but what they didn't see was the road that led him there. The screen faded into grainy, grayscale images, moments frozen in time, fragments of Keanu's past that painted a portrait of resilience and grace. First came the funeral, a tiny casket, impossibly small, surrounded by mourners dressed in black. Keanu stood beside it, motionless, his face empty of expression, hands clenched tightly into the sleeves of his coat. The grief etched into his features was raw, unfiltered, a father robbed of his child. Next, a blurred photo of him holding hands with someone off camera in a hospital hallway, his posture slouched with exhaustion, his eyes hollowed by loss. Years later, a subway car in New York City, Keanu sat among strangers, unnoticed, hunched quietly in a corner seat, staring out the window with a book in his lap, unread. These flashes of his life told a story of profound sorrow, yet also of survival. Despite the tragedies that could have consumed him, bitterness never defined him. Instead, his grief became grace, his silence a form of prayer. The montage paused, giving way to real voices, testimonies unscripted and raw. A rideshare driver recounted, "He tipped me $500. I thought it was a mistake, but he just smiled and said, 'You were kind.' The world needs more of that." A woman shared how Keanu stayed with her overheating car until help arrived, offering comfort without seeking recognition. Another fan described encountering him on the street during a moment of personal crisis. "I was crying, and he sat down next to me, like he knew me. He didn't ask why I was crying, he just listened." These stories revealed a side of Keanu rarely seen in headlines or interviews. They illustrated a philosophy often overlooked in today's fast-paced world, faith expressed through action. While some equate spirituality solely with rituals or doctrines, Keanu demonstrated that true belief manifests in everyday choices, in showing up, listening, extending compassion even when it's inconvenient. Back in the studio, the host pressed on, quoting Bible verses with theatrical exaggeration, mocking the tone of old sermons. "The meek shall inherit the earth," she recited, rolling her eyes dramatically. "Yeah, well, good luck with that in LA." The audience responded with laughter, though less convincingly than before. Long silences stretched between the chuckles now, signaling a growing unease. Keanu remained quiet, still, his presence unwavering. Finally, the host turned to him again, frustration creeping into her voice. "You're really not going to say anything? I mean, do you seriously believe there's someone out there looking out for you?" For the first time that night, Keanu looked directly at her. There was no sharpness in his gaze, just depth. When he spoke, his voice carried a quiet edge that hadn't been there before. "I don't wear it for fashion," he said, referring to the cross. "I wear it for memory, for forgiveness, for survival." His words weren't dramatic, they were lived in, as if he'd repeated them to himself countless times in the dark, when no one was watching. The camera zoomed in on the necklace once more, capturing it not as an object but as a story, one the world was just beginning to read. The host went silent, opening and closing her mouth as if searching for a retort that wouldn't come. The audience held its breath, phones forgotten, attention riveted. Reverence replaced ridicule. The studio fell into suspended quiet, a palpable tension filling the air as if waiting for something to break. But Keanu didn't speak again. He didn't need to. He sat there, his fingers still lightly resting on the cross, not hiding it, not displaying it, just being. The host, sensing she might have pushed too far, shifted uncomfortably in her seat and gave a strained chuckle. "Well, that got heavy," she said, attempting to pull the tone back to familiar ground. "Maybe we should talk about stunts or puppies or something lighter." A few nervous laughs trickled from the crowd, but they quickly faded. The atmosphere had changed irrevocably, something deeper now ran beneath the surface. On the screen, the narrator's voice returned, pondering aloud, Asterisk, what does it mean to have faith in silence? To carry pain without letting it become bitterness? Asterisk, Keanu never preached, never posted sermons, but his life told a story. The screen faded to black and white flashbacks, not scenes from films, but real moments captured in time. Keanu at a cemetery, standing alone at his daughter's grave, his eyes vacant, hands clenched into the sleeves of his coat, a man hollowed by loss. Years later, on a subway train in New York, he sat among strangers, unnoticed, hunched quietly in a corner seat, his head tilted slightly as if listening to a world no one else could hear. These images spoke of a weight some carry and carry alone, not because they are trying to be strong, but because the world no longer gives them another choice. Testimonies filled the soundscape again, layered and overlapping. A crew member on set recalled, he always showed up early, never complained. One day, he noticed I was limping and offered me his chair. I was just background staff. A nurse added, my mom was dying, we were in the same hospital. He sat with us for 15 minutes, never said he was famous, just present. A man in a hoodie, his face blurred, shared, he paid for my brother's surgery. No interviews, no articles, I only found out because the hospital called. Back in the studio, the host smiled tightly and leaned toward Keanu again. You know, she began, her tone tinged with bitterness, people like to romanticize suffering. They say pain makes us deeper, more human. But I think pain is just pain, it ruins things. She laughed bitterly, shaking her head. Keanu didn't interrupt. He simply listened, his steady, open presence inviting trust rather than argument. The host exhaled sharply, waving her hand dismissively. I mean, look, you wear a cross. That's fine. But you don't actually think it means anything, right? It's just fashion, symbolic, right? The room waited. Keanu turned his gaze slowly toward her, his voice steady but carrying a quiet conviction that hadn't been there before. I don't wear it for fashion, he replied. I wear it for memory, for forgiveness, for survival. His words hung in the air, unadorned yet profound, like stones dropped into a still pond. The camera zoomed in on the necklace once more, capturing it not as an accessory but as a testament to lived experience. This time, it didn't just look like an object, it looked like a story, one the world was just beginning to read. The host went silent, her facade cracking further. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, searching for words that wouldn't come. The audience sat hushed, phones untouched, breaths held. Presence replaced performance. The narrator's voice returned, low and thoughtful, asterisk in a world obsessed with loud opinions. There is something unnerving and sacred about someone who chooses to simply live what they believe. Asterisk Keanu didn't add anything else. He just breathed in, out, holding space. The host cleared her throat and smiled again, but this time, it didn't quite land. Something was breaking, not on stage, but inside her. What no one expected was that the person who mocked him the most was about to reveal something that would completely shift the course of the show, in her own life. The show returned from a commercial break, but something in the air was unmistakably different. The studio was quieter, the audience once so eager to laugh at anything now sat with wide eyes and strangely attentive hearts. Even the lighting felt softer, as if the cameras themselves sensed that this next part wasn't scripted. The host retook her seat, visibly composed but not in the same way as before. Her smile lingered, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. She glanced at Keanu, then down at her hands, one of which trembled slightly. She tried to laugh it off, but her voice cracked. Okay, she said, almost to herself, let's talk about something real. Keanu didn't move. He simply waited, patient and grounded, ready to meet her wherever she chose to go. The host took a deep breath and leaned forward, her tone stripped of its usual performative edge. When I was little, she began, her voice lower now, hesitant but sincere, I used to pray every night. I'd close my eyes tight and ask God to make me normal. I didn't even know what that meant, I just thought maybe if I was normal, I wouldn't be so scared all the time. I wouldn't feel wrong. The audience sat still, the silence no longer tense but sacred. She continued, her eyes glassy with unshed tears. And I'd pray, please don't let me go to hell. Please just let me be enough the way I am. But nothing happened. I kept waiting for a sign, a voice, anything. And eventually, I stopped asking. Then I started laughing at all of it, at the prayers, at the books, at the people who still believed. I told myself, it's all fiction. Just a security blanket for people who can't deal with the world. Her voice softened, the mockery replaced by vulnerability. Maybe I didn't laugh at your faith, Keanu. Maybe I laughed at my pain. She paused, exhaling shakily. Keanu looked at her gently, offering neither judgment nor pity, just compassion. The camera captured his face as he leaned in slightly, speaking quietly but firmly. No one who suffers while praying is ever alone, he said. Someone always hears, even if you didn't realize it. For a moment, nothing moved. A woman in the audience wiped away a tear, another held her breath. The host blinked slowly, her carefully constructed facade slipping further with every second. I used to think silence meant no one was listening, she whispered, her voice trembling. But maybe I just didn't know how to listen back. The camera slowly zoomed out, framing both of them sitting there, no spotlight, no dramatic music, just two people raw and uncovered in front of millions. Keanu didn't speak again. He didn't need to. The host looked at him, truly looked, and nodded almost imperceptibly, as if to say, thank you, or perhaps, I'm still here. The narrator's voice returned, low and contemplative, sometimes the hardest part of healing is admitting you need it. And sometimes the most powerful confession is simply telling the truth. But that moment of vulnerability was far from the end. What no one in the studio knew was that backstage, something even more revealing was about to explode, and not even the cameras could contain what came next. Hours after the show aired, clips began to spread like wildfire online. Keanu's quiet presence, the trembling in the host's voice, the way the studio had fallen into silence, it all felt profoundly authentic, something that couldn't be manufactured. Yet, behind the scenes, cracks were starting to form. A video recorded secretly by someone backstage began circulating on social media. At first glance, it seemed innocuous, just the usual chatter of producers during a commercial break. But then, a voice clear and sharp cut through the noise. We want the God stuff pushed, the voice instructed. She needs to poke him, get him to react. That's what drives clips. Another voice chimed in hesitantly, you sure he's not the type who fights back? The first voice replied confidently, exactly. That makes it better. The video went viral within minutes. Initially dismissed as typical behind-the-scenes gossip, it soon gained traction as former insiders stepped forward. One former producer, visibly nervous but resolute, addressed the camera in a live post. I worked on that show for 3 years, he confessed. There were always instructions, unspoken, sometimes written, to go after people who spoke about faith. It wasn't about curiosity, it was about triggering reactions, especially with spiritual guests. That's what the network wanted, more tension, more clicks. Screenshots followed, revealing internal memos suggesting lines and jokes meant to provoke, prompts crafted specifically to mock. Hashtags like #RespectFaith began trending within hours. What had started as a simple interview now looked more like a staged ambush. But the plan had backfired spectacularly because Keanu hadn't fought, shouted, or tried to win. He had simply stayed true. Voices joined the storm online, actors, musicians, people from all walks of life, acknowledging the strength and stillness. Faith, they argued, doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. What happened to respect? One commenter wrote. This man carried more grace in silence than the show did in its entire runtime. Even those with no religious ties chimed in, defending not belief systems but the right to believe without ridicule. The tone shifted dramatically. The host stayed quiet for a while, posting nothing, offering no immediate response. Then, late that night, a single tweet appeared on her account, some moments on live TV aren't scripted. They're human. Tonight, I was human. And I'm still processing what that means. The comments flooded in, some angry, some forgiving, many simply asking one question, why? Backstage leaks continued. One former assistant posted, "They told us Keanu wouldn't make noise, that he was too polite to push back." But what they didn't count on was that his silence would say everything. News outlets picked up the story, journalists debated ethics, and faith leaders weighed in. Psychologists were invited onto morning shows to analyze the emotional impact of moral stillness in modern media. Satire programs covered it too, but with an unusual reverence, admitting, "It's weird." Yet something about that moment made everyone stop laughing. In the midst of the chaos, Keanu didn't respond publicly. No interviews, no statements, no quotes. But he did post one thing, a single image of his cross resting on top of a closed book. No caption accompanied it, yet the message resonated deeply. Shared over 6 million times in a day, the post became a canvas for interpretation. Comments poured in, "For the quiet warriors, faith under fire, the book is closed, but the message speaks." The internet, often a cacophony of division, found unity in the simplicity of silence. The host eventually agreed to an interview with another network, appearing visibly stripped of glamour, her voice softer, almost fragile. "I didn't expect to feel anything," she admitted, her gaze dropping momentarily. "I really didn't." But he didn't argue. He didn't mock me back. He just listened. And I think that did something to me. I wasn't prepared for it. What began as an attempt to provoke had become a cultural reckoning, forcing millions to confront their assumptions about faith, vulnerability, and humanity. The hashtag #MyFaithIsNotAfault flooded social media, transcending religious boundaries. Stories poured in from people of all beliefs, or none, sharing moments of rediscovery, courage, and peace. Churches, mosques, synagogues, and meditation circles echoed the same sentiment: faith doesn't need to shout. Meanwhile, news networks invited specialists to dissect the phenomenon. Some tried to explain the technical glitch during Keanu's second appearance, a voltage dip, a software misfire, but others delved deeper. A neurologist noted, "The body responds to that clip like it does to sacred music. Slow heartbeat, reduced cortisol. What happened there affected people physiologically." A therapist added, "We're not used to people holding space without fighting." That moment was a reset, emotionally, culturally. It wasn't about agreeing or disagreeing anymore. It was about remembering something we'd forgotten, that grace, presence, and truth don't have to come with volume. As the final scenes played, a montage unfolded, a child in a hospital room watching the clip and whispering, "That's what calm looks like," a father hugging his daughter at the airport, both wearing crosses, a group of strangers gathered on a rooftop in silence, phones turned off, just breathing. And finally, Keanu walking alone through a quiet park, the sun setting behind him, the cross resting gently against his chest. Perhaps this story was never about television, never about Keanu. Perhaps it was the beginning of something waking up inside all of us, the kind of faith that doesn't need to shout to be heard.